Hi, I'm Lance Cottrell, Chief Scientist at Intrepid, and today I want to talk about how just using Bitcoin can compromise your online undercover operations. Bitcoin seems an obvious choice when making online undercover transactions. After all, there are no names attached to it. It seems very anonymous. All of the accounts are just random numbers and cryptographic keys. There's no know your customer rules, so you don't need to give any ID when dealing with Bitcoin. So it sounds great, right? Well, unfortunately, if you dig a little further into how Bitcoin actually works, it can lead directly to the downfall of your undercover operation. And this is not just a theoretical threat. In fact, with the Mueller Report on the Russian hackers in 2016, he was able to do much of his attribution of those attackers through their Bitcoin transactions. Many cases where he was able to tie different aliases together and show that different websites were actually owned by the same person, it was because he could track the Bitcoin transactions to show that they all led back to the same accounts. To understand why this is, we're going to need to unpack a little bit more of how Bitcoin actually works. Now, all your Bitcoins are actually just entries in the blockchain, which is a public distributed ledger which contains every single transaction in Bitcoin that has ever taken place. Anytime someone's given you money, anytime you've given someone else coins, every transaction is on the blockchain. And the blockchain is public. Literally anyone can download this entire history of transactions and look through it. And there are amazing third-party tools that allow you to analyze this in great detail to understand the patterns and see where coins are coming from and where they're going to. The first step in using Bitcoins is to acquire Bitcoins, and that means you either need to mine them or you need to buy them. But the source is always going to be visible, and if you buy them from an exchange, it's going to be well known what transaction started off that whole process. And safely buying from an exchange is something we'll need to cover in another episode. At the end of the path, you're spending your coins. So you're going to some merchant and buying a product or service. And that merchant knows which Bitcoin wallet paid it for which services. So if you're buying, say, a relay server, they know that this wallet with this ID number paid for this particular account at this IP address, and they know which account you registered to manage that, right? They've got all that information, which of course they can be forced to reveal. If anyone can subpoena them or hack them or just convince them to cooperate, that data is going to be available. So you're vulnerable at both ends. When you acquire the coins in the first place and when you spend them, both of those entities have information about the wallets that they talked to. And of course, all the transactions are visible on that blockchain. So let's start off by looking at a really naive model. So here we have a wallet, and we're buying coins from some exchange and then using it to buy 3 different services from 3 different merchants, and let's say that's for 3 different aliases. Now, if one of those transactions attracts attention, and for whatever reason the merchant is convinced to hand over the information, now your opponent knows that your wallet was used to purchase that service. But they can then look at the blockchain and see all the other transactions that came from the same wallet. So they're going to be trivially able to see the other 2 merchants that you transacted business with and go lean on them. And so very quickly they're going to be able to tie these behaviors together. They'll see, all 3 of these transactions were all conducted by the same entity, rather than the 3 aliases that you're trying to pretend to be. An obvious next step is to try to complicate this whole process. And so here, we're hiding our trail a little bit better. We're buying a bunch of Bitcoins into a single wallet and then sending that to 3 different wallets that then send to another 3 wallets that then make the transactions. So each one of these merchants is not seeing the same source wallet. And you'd think maybe that's going to hide you a little bit more. But because there's a single path, all of the coins came from the same source wallet for each one of these activities, that's very strong evidence that they're still tied. And because you can still look forward to see who else that source wallet paid, it tells your attacker exactly who else they need to be leaning on. So while this is slightly better than the naive state, it actually isn't much better, and you're still very easy to expose. So a better approach is to separate out your alias activities completely. So rather than trying to do one transaction, you're actually going to go buy Bitcoins 3 different times for your 3 different aliases for those 3 different transactions. Each one of those is going to be handled completely separately, as if that alias had gone out, bought the Bitcoins, and then spent them. We can put in an extra hop to spread out that information slightly, make it a little bit more difficult. But fundamentally, the security here is coming from the fact that we're using 3 completely separated paths. And of course, all of the rest of the tradecraft has to be in place too, right? You couldn't be using the same IP addresses either. But now, if you go lean on one of these merchants or they cooperate, the only information they have is about that single chain. They're not going to be able to gather any information about the other aliases of the other Bitcoin wallets that are out there. Another option is to use Bitcoin tumblers. And tumblers, fundamentally, are money laundering services that run on the internet. People have set up servers that many people can send Bitcoins to, and then they randomize them and send them back out. So an outside observer has no way of knowing which one of the people that sent money to the tumbler received money on the outgoing side. They can't tie the incoming accounts and the outgoing accounts. So it can be effective. They need to be busy because you're only hiding among the other people that were using the tumbler at that particular moment. Now the big gotcha is twofold. One, they're expensive. These people charge a lot of money to hide your coins. And 2, they're not necessarily trustworthy. After all, these are people who are providing a money laundering service on the internet. So they might just be wanting to collect that data themselves to use for blackmail or other purposes down the line. But of course, many of these services are actually run by national intelligence services to try to catch other people laundering their coins. So you need to think very carefully before using a Bitcoin tumbler whether or not you really trust this entity, and if it was in fact keeping records of all of the incoming and outgoing coins, would that put your mission at risk? Now, Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency out there. There are numerous other blockchain-based payment systems that you could choose to use. But Bitcoin is the 500-pound gorilla. It's the big one. It's the one that most of the merchants take. But some of them actually have much better privacy characteristics than Bitcoin. The 2 best known are Zcash and Monero. And so using them is an option. When you do your transactions there, it's much more difficult to trace it back to say, you took out this money and it's exactly this one person who is behind all of these different aliases. The problem is they are much less used. So a given merchant might see very few Monero transactions compared to the number of Bitcoin transactions they're seeing. Also, many legitimate merchants don't take Monero and Zcash. Why? Well, because they don't care about privacy, and the people who do really care about privacy tend to be criminals. And so if you're going into a criminal environment and doing transactions with them, they may be all over these privacy tools. But if you're trying to buy legitimate services from legitimate merchants, it's quite likely they won't accept these privacy-centric cryptocurrencies. This is not to say that you should avoid cryptocurrencies completely. They are an important tool in your arsenal and can be a critical asset at certain times, but they're no panacea. They open you up to a whole range of new threats because of the public nature of the blockchain. But as long as you're very careful in how you structure your transactions, pay attention to your OPSEC, and use the right tradecraft in how you acquire and dispose of those coins, you should be just fine. And actually, disposing the coins is one of those tricky factors, because once you've put them out to the alias's wallet, you really can't bring them back without compromising that alias. So you might be able to recover them at the end of a mission, but otherwise you may sort of be stuck with them. So be careful about deploying more Bitcoin than you need. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this episode interesting and useful, and if so, please like and subscribe, and then click the bell icon to be notified each time new episodes are available. We upload new content every other week, and I'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like to see me address. Please let me know down in the comments. Till next time, ciao.